picture this. Your engine just rolled past 180,000 miles. It idles smoother than the day you bought it. Your fuel economy climbed back up by almost 4 miles per gallon. And the last time a mechanic looked under your hood, he asked you what you were doing different. That is where you could be sitting 6 months from now, and the whole transformation costs you about $3.20 in your own driveway. Right now, though, you are somewhere else entirely. You are watching that gas gauge drop faster than it used to. You are feeling that little hesitation when you punch the throttle at a green light. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you already know the next repair quote is coming. And here is the part that really wears a man down. You change the oil on time. You use the fuel the manual says to use. You even let the dealership talk you into their $190 tune-up package last spring, and still, the engine feels tired. Still, you are watching money leak out of the tank and out of your wallet every single week. And nothing you do seems to actually move the needle. Here is the truth. Most people, when their engine starts feeling weak, go straight for the wrong fixes. They dump a bottle of fuel injector cleaner in the tank and call it a day. They pay $600 for a coil pack they did not need. They upgrade to premium 93 octane gas, thinking it will somehow wake the engine up when their compression ratio cannot even use it. And after all that money, nothing changes. None of those things touch the actual part of your engine that is silently choking the life out of every combustion cycle. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you the $3 spark plug trick the old-timers use to stretch an engine past 300,000 miles, and I am going to break this into two distinct halves because the trick has two completely separate jobs to do. First, we fix what is already wrong inside your cylinders right now. Second, we deal with the silent killer that builds up around the plug itself and quietly destroys your coils, your catalytic converter, and eventually your pistons. And at the end, I will give you the one permanent habit that locks in another 50,000 miles of clean. Strong running, so the gains never slip away. Part 1. The dying spark and the weak burn. This matters first because every other problem in a gasoline engine traces back to one thing, whether the fuel in the cylinder actually burns completely or whether half of it gets shoved out the exhaust as unburned waste. When your spark plug starts to wear, and I mean even the tiniest wear, the gap between the center electrode and the ground strap opens up. From the factory, that gap is set somewhere between 0.028 and 0.044 of an inch, depending on your engine. What most people do not know is that for every additional thousandth of an inch, the gap widens through normal erosion. Your ignition coil has to push roughly an extra 1,000 volts to jump it. A plug with 30,000 miles on it might be demanding 40,000 volts from a coil that was designed to deliver 30,000. That coil is now running hot. The spark is now weaker at the actual moment of ignition, and the flame front inside your cylinder is now lazy, uneven, and incomplete. Here is what that feels like from the driver's seat. The engine still starts, it still drives, but it sips 2 extra gallons of gas a week. It hesitates for a fraction of a second on acceleration, and at idle you feel that faint, almost invisible shudder through the steering wheel. Most people think that is just an old engine being an old engine. Most people are wrong. That is a misfire, so small the computer does not even throw code. It is dumping raw fuel down your exhaust, slowly poisoning your oxygen sensors, baking the inside of your catalytic converter until one day, around 2,000 miles from now, you get a P420 code and a $1,200 repair estimate. So here is the reframe. A worn spark plug does not just need replacing. A worn spark plug is actively destroying 3 other expensive parts of your engine every single mile you keep driving on it. Now the trick itself, you pull each plug one at a time, never all at once, because the firing order matters and you do not want to mix them up. You look at the electrode. If the sharp edge of that center electrode has rounded over into a little dome, the plug is done, no matter what the mileage says. You take a proper wire-type gap gauge, the round kind that costs about $3 at any parts store. You check the gap against the number printed on the underside of your hood or in the owner's manual. 9 times out of 10 on a plug with more than 20,000 miles, the gap has drifted open by 4 to 6 thousandths. You gently tap the ground strap down on a clean, hard surface until the correct wire of the gauge just barely drags through with light resistance. That is the trick. That single adjustment, done right, restores the original voltage demand on your coil, restores the full spark energy at the tip, and restores complete combustion inside the cylinder. Drivers routinely report 1 to 3 miles per gallon gained within the first tank, and that adds up to hundreds of dollars a year. If your plugs are already burnt past saving, replace them with the exact heat range your manual specifies. Do not go fancy. A standard copper plug, properly gapped, outperforms an expensive iridium plug that is gapped wrong every single time. And before you thread the new plug in, put one tiny dab of anti-seize on the threads. Just one, and torque it to spec, usually between 12 and 18 foot-pounds on aluminum heads. Over-tighten and you crack the porcelain. Under-tighten and the plug walks loose and blows out a thread. The universal prevention tip for part 1 is this. Check your gap every 20,000 miles, even on plugs rated for 100,000. The manufacturer rates them for replacement, not for peak performance. Peak performance dies long before the plug does. Part 2. And this is a completely different problem, technically distinct from a worn gap. Now, we are not talking about the spark itself. We are talking about what surrounds the spark. We are talking about carbon fouling, oil seepage at the plug well, and the corroded ground strap. This is the silent killer. And the catastrophic consequence is that it does not announce itself for months. It starts as a little black soot ring around the insulator. It progresses into a glazed brown crust on the ceramic, and by the time you actually feel the rough idle, the misfire has already cooked 1 or 2 ignition coils, dumped enough raw fuel into the exhaust to slowly destroy a $1,500 catalytic converter, washed enough gasoline past the rings to dilute your oil and start scoring your cylinder walls. People come into shops with a $4,000 rebuild estimate, and the whole disaster started with a $3 fouled plug they ignored for 18 months. So here is method 1, the cheapest and the one anyone can do tonight. When you pull each plug, take a small brass wire brush, never steel, and gently clean the electrode and the ground strap. Steel scratches the metal and creates hot spots. Brass is soft enough to lift the carbon without damaging the surface. Then take a clean rag with a tiny bit of carburetor cleaner or brake cleaner on it, and wipe the white ceramic insulator until it is bright white again. That insulator is what isolates the high voltage from grounding out prematurely. When it is coated in carbon, you are losing spark energy through the side of the plug instead of across the gap where it belongs. A clean insulator alone can recover noticeable smoothness at idle within the first start. Method 2, and this is the $3 trick the title is built around. You take a tube of dielectric grease, the silicone-based stuff sold in every parts store for about $3, and you put a thin film, not a glob, a film on the inside of the rubber boot that slides over the top of the plug, a smaller dab on the ceramic of the plug itself just below where the boot will sit. Here is why this is the single most underrated trick in the entire trade. That dielectric grease does 3 jobs at once. It seals out moisture, which is what causes the corrosion that eats your coil terminals and ground strap. It prevents the rubber boot from fusing to the porcelain, which is what tears your boots in half the next time you try to service the engine. And because it is a non-conductive insulator, it forces every single volt of that spark energy to travel exactly where it is supposed to travel. Straight down the center electrode and across the gap, instead of leaking sideways through microcracks in the boot. The old mechanics knew this. They put dielectric grease on every plug, every distributor cap, every connector. Their engines ran clean for 300,000 miles while everyone else was replacing coils every 40,000. Method 3, for the man who wants to go a step further. Pull the valve cover and check the plug well seals. On a lot of modern 4 and 6 cylinder engines, especially anything with a coil-on plug setup, the valve cover gasket has a separate rubber grommet that seals around each spark plug tube. When that grommet hardens and cracks, usually somewhere between 80,000, a 120,000 miles engine oil seeps down into the plug well and pools around the base of the plug. That oil bakes onto the porcelain, shorts out the spark, destroys the boot, and floods the coil. A new valve cover gasket set runs you anywhere from $20 to $40. Replacing it before it fails saves you from a misfire diagnosis that mechanics routinely misdiagnose as a bad coil pack at $200 per cylinder. Part 3. Prevention. Here is the single universal action that locks in everything you just learned and prevents both halves of this problem from ever coming back. Once a year on every plug, you pull, you inspect, you clean with brass brush, you gap. You dab dielectric grease on the boot and the insulator, you torque to spec, and you put it back. That is it. 20 minutes, $3 in grease, and a gap gauge you will own for the rest of your life. The mechanism is simple. You are stopping carbon before it fouls, stopping moisture before it corrodes, stopping the gap before it drifts, and stopping the boot before it fuses. You are catching the failure cascade at the very first link before it ever reaches your coils, your sensors, or your converter. That one habit, done every 12 months, saves the average driver between $200 and $400 a year in fuel alone, plus the $1,000 plus in parts you will never have to replace because they will never wear out the way they would have over 10 years. That is the equivalent of an extra 50,000 miles of clean, strong running on the same engine. Now, here is what is going to happen once you do this. Your engine is going to run cleaner and burn fuel more completely than it has in years. That means something else is going to start showing up, a new problem you did not have before. As the combustion gets more complete, your oxygen sensors are going to start reading more accurately. On a lot of higher mileage engines that exposes a slightly clogged mass airflow sensor, a lazy upstream O2 sensor that was being masked by the weak burn, you might see a check engine light pop up in the next month. You might notice the idle hunting a little at a cold start. That is not a problem you caused. That is a problem you uncovered. It is a 10-minute fix with a $5 can of the right cleaner if you know exactly what you are doing, if that is happening to you, or if you want to get ahead of it before it does. Drop a comment below right now and just write MAF or sensor so I know to put you on the list. The next video is going to walk you through exactly how to clean a mass airflow sensor, reset your fuel trims at home without a scan tool, the same way the old mechanics did it before the dealership started charging $160 for the same 5-minute job. Hit subscribe so you do not miss it when it drops, because once you fix the spark, the sensor is the very next link in the chain. And I want you running stronger and cleaner than the day you drove that car off the lot.